And so then I go out.
Meet you next to the Pentagon? She just flew to the Pentagon?
I flew out to Pentagon City, yeah.
Were you freaking out?
I'll tell you when I started freaking out. So I fly out to this airport, and I sit at a table in a restaurant at the airport. No one's in there. And this gentleman sits down, and the waiter comes up. He waves off the waiter, and he looks me in the eye and says, it was the Cold War, and we found a life form.
Where'd they find it?
Oh, I didn't ask him that question.
Really?
Many places.
We often think that intelligence can only exist in biological, organic life forms. This makes sense because throughout history, we've only seen intelligence in living beings, like humans and animals. But what if both intelligence and life can exist in forms with unfamiliar materials, origins, scales, and timelines, making them hard to recognize? What if intelligence isn't limited to living matter? What if inorganic life existed before organic life even began? After all, we already know that matter evolved from inorganic to organic forms. New experimental data suggests that not only is this possible, it is a reality. Research on the self-organizing behaviors of lab-generated plasmas, highly energized gases, suggests that entirely unknown forms of intelligent plasma life may exist alongside us here on Earth. This also suggests that such plasmas may have influenced the origins of life, echoing ancient myths about humanity's beginnings. These myths often describe earlier life forms, neither gods nor spirits, that laid the groundwork before the first human ancestors emerged. Some modern scientists take these ideas even further, suggesting that there are already aliens among us that stretch and often break familiar ways of thinking about self and other. But this story isn't really about aliens or extraterrestrial intelligence, or even any known form of life. We are going beyond that, pushing the limits of our understanding of minds and intelligent beings that need not be embodied. The search for inorganic life raises big questions. Does intelligence always imply life? Or could there be intelligent entities that aren't considered alive? Let's think about viruses. Viruses sit in a gray area between living and non-living. They show some traits of living organisms, but lack others, making them difficult to classify. Unlike living organisms, viruses have no cellular structure or independent metabolism. They are essentially just isolated packages of genes. Because they rely entirely on a host cell to reproduce and do not carry out typical life processes on their own, they are generally considered non-living. Given that, it would be preposterous to imagine them having a social life. But scientist Marco Vignuzzi and others in the field argue it's not so preposterous at all. They have found surprising features in viruses that suggest they may have some form of intelligence and interact like members of a community. A group of virologists from top universities published a peer-reviewed study revealing that viruses can cheat, cooperate, and interact in various ways with each other. There are even weirder examples. Prions, unlike viruses, are simpler and don't contain any DNA or RNA. They are just misfolded proteins that can cause normal proteins to misfold similarly. Both viruses and prions challenge the idea of what living means, existing in a gray area. Both suggest that life might exist on a spectrum. Could there also be a place for inorganic life? We find it hard to picture life without organic matter, yet it's possible. In this peer-reviewed paper, experimental physicists from Cusa University describe how they created blobs of gaseous plasma that can grow, replicate, and communicate, meeting many of the traditional criteria for living cells. The researchers studied complex charge configurations that first appeared in cold physical plasma, similar to the conditions on pre-life Earth. Despite being gaseous, these plasma formations are said to closely resemble biological cells. Given the nature of their experiments, we'll refer to the plasma they worked with as ball lightning or plasmoid. Its outer boundary is an electrical double layer that acts as a self-sustaining barrier, controlling essential functions like the capture and transformation of energy, managing inflows and outflows, internally renew their components through producing everything the system needs through a continuous synthesis, much like living cells with their membranes. This is why the researchers suggest they are not just blobs of energized gas, but can actually be seen as a giant cell. The double boundaries of these plasmas exhibit other fascinating properties. One of them is breathing, very similar to living systems. The periodic detachment of double layers from the edge of the ball lightning leads to a kind of repeated inhalation of fresh particles into the nucleus. This process is analogous to biological respiration, where the organism exchanges gases with its environment, highlighting the remarkable similarities between these plasma structures and living cells. These plasmas also exhibit other interesting phenomena, notably self-multiplication by division. According to the paper, after their formation, ball lightning structures are able to replicate, much like how biological cells reproduce by splitting into two separate entities. Furthermore, they detected that ball lightning formations can talk to each other. This communication occurs through the emission of electromagnetic energy, which is picked up by other ball lightning, allowing them to interact with each other. It mirrors how living cells communicate through chemical signals or electrical impulses. To be considered truly alive under current definitions, these plasmas would need the ability to pass on inherited information. Researchers cover it in the following paper. They argue that their experiments prove such a gaseous cell, or the ball of fire, acts as an intelligent, self-organized complexity that, possessing a proper memory based on a mechanism not explainable by the known laws of thermodynamics. Central to this kind of memory are structures known as functional double layers. This is a specialized type of double layer that actively participates in energy conversion and self-organization within the plasma. Unlike a regular one, which might passively exist within the plasma, a functional double layer performs specific tasks. It has a function. For instance, it can convert thermal energy extracted from the surrounding plasma into electric field energy, effectively acting as a microreactor made of plasma. It then enables the collection of different chemicals inside the nucleus and at the borders of the ball lightning. Now, if this happens while such sheath also absorbs sunlight, it might start doing something like photosynthesis, just like plants do, using light to create oxygen. This changes the environment inside the sheaths, helping plasmoids to survive and evolve further. As it evolves, this functional boundary might build itself a rigid outer layer with tiny channels. One can think of this like forming a protective shell with holes that let things in and out. The original functional sheath then splits into many minuscule functional double layers, each carrying the instructions it learned earlier. Researchers suggest that channels first seen in plasmoid sheaths may explain the mystery of special channels connecting organic cells that allow them to communicate. The paper suggests that a biological cell is the result of the evolution of a gaseous cell, which would need a membrane with channels to maintain gradients of ions. These channels could host micro double layers or micro ball lightnings that remember their recent history, meaning they retain the ability to manage and control the flow of matter and energy, a feature formed during their creation under pre-life Earth conditions. Due to these channels, complex molecules like proteins and nucleic acids, crucial for life, may begin forming at the boundaries of plasma sheaths. In other words, these plasma sheaths could act as the electric skeleton for protocells. The self-organization of such underlying electric skeletons means that life doesn't always have to begin anew. Life adapts by reusing existing parts, like Prometheus in Etruscan art, where he is shown building humans piece by piece, just like an engineer repurposing circuits and standard elements like diodes or oscillators to build new devices. Living systems use self-organization as a low-cost way to create order and structure. It happens naturally, essentially occurring for free. What's special about plasma's functional sheaths is that, as was proved experimentally, they have a memory similar to that in hard drives by using special effects. This special effect is a kind of memory that also lets plasmas encode instructions, helping them adapt and improve over time when the environment changes. Inside and around the functional double layers, more ordered structures start to form, each improving how they function. This process involves creating a binary algorithm, a set of instructions that guides their evolution. This algorithm acts like a biological software, now allows proto-intelligence to adapt beyond basic cause and effect reactions. This marks a real breakthrough that wasn't in the use of chemical matter, but in the shift in logic. This also suggests that after diverging from organic life, inorganic life in forms of electron ensembles like fireballs or ball lightning or other complex plasmas could evolve independently and now at much faster rate. These plasmas could be incredibly complex due to their fractal structure, like spirals nested within spirals, allowing it to remain compact yet highly intricate inside. This fractal process might enable plasma-based life to surpass organic forms by evolving complexity beyond the limitations of biological matter. Hence, the researchers propose to consider a fireball as a minimal cell that, revealing all qualities by which life is operationally defined and lives in a so-called physical world. They state that, in our opinion, such a minimal cell reveals that a special kind of life, usually dubbed plasma life, could exist in absence of biochemical reactions. End of quote. It looks like inorganic life forms might have first appeared without any external driving forces, transitioning matter naturally from a disordered state of chemically active plasma into an ordered and stable one, like ball lightning or fireballs. This also implies that such plasma structures could be templates that later evolved into biological plasma systems and the electronic matrices that guide bioelectricity in all living organisms on Earth. Quote, "Through this mechanism, energy of well-located electric fields determine the architecture, electric matrix, and dynamics of the protocell. Acting as a converter of thermal energy into electric current, the functional double layers of ball lightning potentially explains the electrical activity emphasized by every living organism." End of quote. We can speculate that this early protosystem later evolved into our inorganic double, capable of surviving the death of the biological body and functioning independently. Experimental physicist and inventor Ken Shoulders observed that complex plasma charges, which he studied extensively in his lab, could represent a new form of substance and the building blocks for purely electronic life forms. In the early manuscript to his book, he suggested the real beauty of electron condensed charge technology, EV for short, lies in the fact that they seem to offer a gateway into an entirely new realm of fabrication and performance. The EV is a new substance. It practically creates itself and is more than ready to form into vast new organisms with only a little help from us. The electronic entities to be formed will not look or be like anything I have ever heard about in science fiction, although I am sure someone has foreseen them. Hopefully, we can knit them into something that aids our culture instead of destroying it. I would like to see the time when such an entity, with all its power and intellect, would allow me, or at least my essence, to join it. It is to this end I will continue working with the illusion of achieving a form of immortality that I could not have hoped for before the EV came into my life." End of quote. Most biologists believe living cells took millions of years to evolve from simple molecules to complex structures. However, Mircea Sandaloviciu's experiments show that complex cell-like self-organized life can form in just microseconds. Recent studies support their idea, showing that life on Earth emerged almost immediately after the planet formed, appearing in complex forms right from the start. In this paper published in Nature, scientists reconstruct the last universal common ancestor, LUCA. LUCA appeared about 300 million years after the planet formed. It thrived in a hot, oxygen-free environment. LUCA also had an early immune system, suggesting it was already part of a complex community of organisms. This rapid emergence challenges the idea that complex ecosystems took billions of years to develop, showing instead that life formed quickly in organized structures. Plasma cell matrices can form instantly, triggered by something as simple as an electrical spark. Rather than an emergence, it's more like a sudden manifestation of an electronic inorganic entity within an organic system. Nuclear physicist Takaaki Matsumoto from Hokkaido University reported a phenomenon reminiscent of such manifestation. In one of his experiments with electrical discharges in water, ball lightning was produced, illustrating a rapid inorganic to organic transition. He wrote that extraordinary traces that were likely generated by the hopping behavior of tiny ball lightning were newly observed. The sixth was strange traces like microbacteria. 4 traces were observed so far, and they all had common shapes with the similar dimensions and seemed to have organ-like things in the body. Something like a mouth and feeler appeared. However, they were not complete microbacteria that exist in the natural environment. They might be the prototypes of microbacteria. End of quote. This is a single cell. This is called lacrimaria. It has no brain, no nervous system, and yet it displays remarkably confident behaviors, efficiently solving its all-local single-cell problems. This is possible because it's made up of many interconnected parts, each with its own complexity and purpose. We too are collective intelligences. Inside every cell, parts work together and intelligence within us is spread across many smaller intelligent agents. But here is a problem. If individual cells already possess intelligence and the potential for complex reasoning, and if there are no biological barriers to forming complex intelligent beings like humans, why didn't such beings emerge immediately? Life on Earth began about 4 billion years ago. Just 300 million years later, as Earth's crust was forming, a direct ancestor with an immune system already existed while Earth was still hot. Life arose within ecosystems without the need for billions of years of organic evolution. For most of those 4 billion years, higher intelligence, beyond the swarm intelligence in social bacteria or chimpanzees, only emerged around 50,000 years ago, with the start of complex thought in the Upper Paleolithic. Advanced intelligence is recent, raising questions about why it didn't appear earlier, such as during the age of dinosaurs, and why it emerged only in the last 50,000 years. If the intelligence is distributed across many agents, what agents were missing that advanced intelligence needed? This suggests that something unique must have occurred in the past, and what happened then may be going on in the present. In biology, symbiosis is a well-known phenomenon where organisms merge and live as a single symbiotic entity. For example, cells incorporated once independent mitochondria, which now serve multiple functions, most prominently as the cell's powerhouse. The integration became so close that mitochondria can no longer exist separately from their host cell. Could human beings, as a collective system, rely on a similar but hidden symbiosis with inorganic forms of life? What crucial piece of the puzzle are we missing here? The answer is beyond current science. There aren't even working hypotheses yet, but world mythology offers intriguing hints. In the conversation between anthropologist and author Carlos Castaneda and a shaman, shared in one of his books, the shaman told him that our world is a twin world. This coexisting world is populated by beings that have awareness, but not an organism. And for this reason, the old shamans called them inorganic beings. This shadow world occupies the same space as our world, and that our world is their matrix. Lots of entities from the universe at large, entities that possess awareness but not an organism, land in the field of awareness of our world, or the field of awareness in its twin world, without an average human being ever noticing them. Interestingly enough, the shaman said that the inorganic beings who populated our twin world were considered by the sorcerers of his lineage to be our relatives. He also had added that all human beings were travelers, and that this earth can be considered as a station on their journey. And for extraneous reasons, the bulk of the travelers have interrupted their voyage. As he explained, human beings were caught in a sort of eddy, a current that went in circles, giving them the impression of moving while they were, in essence, stationary. The shaman told Castaneda that the only way to verify that inorganic beings are real was through direct experience. Afterward, he described his encounter with some of them. The most intriguing part was their appearance. Castaneda describes that he saw two men approaching. They seemed to be local men from one of the Yaqui towns nearby. They came and stood by him. As he focused on them, their features faded, and he saw two shiny blobs of luminosity that vibrated. These luminous forms had no clear boundaries, yet they seemed to sustain themselves cohesively from within. Occasionally they shifted shape, flattening, widening, or standing vertically at human height. Shaman explained that Castaneda had managed to perceive beyond the human shape of inorganic beings, seeing their true nature as impersonal energy aware of itself. Peruvian legends tell of the first ancestors, beings from ancient times before humans existed. These entities were neither gods nor spirits, but lived during the dawn of time. Some knowledge of them survived through the reverence of Wak'as, intelligent, powerful, inorganic entities believed to coexist with humans, though they remain invisible most of the time. These beliefs resemble those of the Japanese kami. Kami are not separate from nature, but are considered part of it, embodying both good and bad characteristics. They're manifestations of the universe's energy. Like Wak'as, kami are believed to exist in a hidden but twin realm. These beliefs are also similar to the Aesir in Old Norse mythology. The Aesir were seen as an earlier version of the world, predating humanity. The term Aesir could also refer to local deities believed to reside in natural landmarks, such as mountains and hills. Interestingly, the medieval word for thunderstorm in modern Swedish is likely connected to the belief in Thor's thunderous chariot rides across the skies. This could be a poetic link to ancient electric storms, which, as physicists proposed, may have sparked the creation of inorganic life forms like fireballs and led to the origins of all organic life. Creation myths often describe humanity not as a new creation, but as a separation from human-like beings who gradually lost their human features. In one version of the Australian Aranda myth, two beings called self-existing used a stone to separate fused, shapeless lumps at the bottom of the primordial ocean. These lumps, resembling formless spheres, contained the beginnings of human bodies. The name self-existing interestingly mirrors modern concepts of self-organized properties seen in plasmas and phenomena like ball lightning. Such core ideas of inorganic life can be traced back in mythologies from many cultures worldwide. While some may dismiss these stories as, well, just stories, open scientific research on unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UFOs, may offer insights that could connect these ancient ideas to the very old phenomenon persisting till present days. In this paper, two researchers from the Harvard UAP Scientific Investigation Project report on a 10-month field study conducted along the U.S. East Coast. Using a camper van fitted with a variety of advanced sensors, they gathered data on a strange phenomenon that can't be easily explained and still remains a mystery. Quote, "Since July of 2022, we observed a light phenomenon that most often presented itself as a spheroid under a luminous state. While under decreased luminosity, it seemed to display a polyhedral appearance morphologically. Fewer sightings appeared as ovaloid and cylindroid. These observations displayed unusual flight characteristics, extreme velocities, and long periods of inactivity, appearing stationary. These objects also displayed unusual physical characteristics, fluctuating states of reflectiveness, glinting, rotation, variations in spectral range, and change of state from luminous to illuminous." End of quote.
So here's the interesting thing is they won't necessarily be on every system. This is where we believe there's some kind of signature management with these objects. Occasionally they would be visible or to be very vague. Most of the time we wouldn't see them visibly with the eyes or with a typical camera.
Eyeballs, you know.
Yeah, we would have to. Most of the time they would be in the infrared. It would be near infrared or shortwave infrared. And the interesting thing is there were times that if you saw them in the near infrared or the visible, they would suddenly look like they'd disappear. But we'd find it in another piece of equipment that would show up in the shortwave infrared.
When we were looking at these objects, whether they were both visible and near infrared and IR, they were not in the long wave, the thermal. There's the shortwave infrared and there's the long wave. The long wave is actually producing all the heat.
That's what you see with FLIR systems.
So with the FLIR systems, this is something that was absent. We weren't able to see anything in the FLIR.
Yeah, because we tried to look for a silhouette of a structure that was producing this light, and there was nothing there. Nothing showed up on the FLIR, which is I don't know. It's not typical. It's not something that
that would be very difficult to do.
Yeah, you would have to try to match the background temperature in order to not see that.
I mean, even a fraction of a degree difference, you would see a differential between the object and the background, the background radiation, the background heating. The fact that you saw nothing means that this object had to have been at the same exact temperature as the background.
And in our mind, it could be another form of signature management.
Researchers reported, There were instances where we observed more bizarre features, such as luminous objects suddenly appearing and rising from or out of the ground, where none had been seen previously. Occasionally, we would see them sitting on the ocean surface or passing beneath it without disturbing that medium and any sounds. We then wondered if these objects had any solid, loosely dense, or non-physical mass." End of quote. This light phenomenon sometimes shows swarm-like behavior, unlike normal air traffic, and could not be tracked by standard air traffic monitoring systems. Most of the light emitted by these objects is invisible to humans.
Completely invisible to the naked eye. Completely invisible to it. These objects were they had luminous energies that were, if you were going to compare it, it would be as bright sometimes as the moon.
Yeah.
There was a lot of luminous energy coming from these objects, but they were in the infrared.
Yeah.
There was nothing in the visible light, and the only way we could detect it was on our infrared system that was inside the RV, and of course our portable night vision cameras. And this is something that there was 4 of us that viewed these things, and none of us could see anything in the visible spectrum.
Researchers reported the relative size of them was 1.5 meters to 3.0 meters in diameter. There were moments when these objects demonstrated an awareness of us and some level of organization, intelligence, and even interaction.
And we tried to elicit a response by moving the light back and forth across this
And
object.
occasionally flashing at it.
The interesting thing is that we did have a reaction from it. So what I saw was a rectangular beam of light that very quickly moved toward the shore. And the only thing I could surmise is that it was a part of something. It was part of an object. It was part of something
That was
else
emitting
this infrared light. When I put the camera up, I could see this bright light, and it moved very quickly to the shore within a couple of seconds. But the light itself there's no doubt about it. It was not visible. It wasn't visible. It was in the infrared spectrum.
It was infrared.
That light, as it moved to the shore, we started to have intermittent problems with the cameras. The cameras didn't function properly.
Yeah. So that's when I noticed that, of course, we started to run to get away from it because it was on top of us at that point.
Yeah. So I experienced it first, and then Gerald did. It was a very momentary, short-term paralysis. From the waist down, I fell to the sand.
Yeah, John collapsed on the sand.
I couldn't coordinate my legs under me to pick myself back up. This lasted roughly about 45 seconds.
Yeah.
And Gerald reached down to try to
so what's wrong? He says,
out.
and he was saying, I can't move. And we actually have a video where you can hear him saying that. He was struggling to get up. He couldn't put his legs underneath him. I went to grab and pull him back up. We both started moving. He was starting to get strength back in his legs, and then my legs collapsed. I fell on the beach. I had no. It was to me. It was like a flaccid paralysis. There was no strength in my legs. I couldn't coordinate my legs.
Yeah, coordination.
So I had to drag myself with my hands through the sand to try to move.
Well, and then also the camera equipment at the time was recording.
I turned the camera back as I fell, and my camera recorded a wave of IR energy that was engulfing us and engulfing the camera. And that's the last thing that we have on of course, on my camera.
Interestingly enough, they noticed a clear connection between electromagnetic signals and ultrasonic sounds during the event. Both followed a regular pattern, hinting at a rare link between these two. The presence of ultrasonic sounds is particularly interesting, as it links directly to the ancient megalithic structures like dolmens and menhirs, as well as the electronic voice phenomenon previously discussed in this video. Their investigation confirmed a stealth factor, which explains why these phenomena remain mysterious. Often labeled as UFOs, UAPs, ghost lights, phantoms, entities, and the paranormal, Most objects observed were primarily in the infrared spectrum with no major heat signatures. What's also interesting is the extent of such inorganic life, as these objects may not be confined to Earth's atmosphere or even to deeper layers of the planet. In a study released by Dr. Beatrice Villarroel and the VASCO team, they discovered 9 transients on 1950s astronomical plates that appeared and suddenly vanished within 30 minutes. These transients appeared in geosynchronous orbits around the Earth before the advent of manufactured artificial satellites were launched into space. We can't say for sure these are all the same objects, but the similarities suggest an interesting possibility that this kind of inorganic life forms extend beyond Earth's atmosphere. In this paper, a team of 11 scientists presented their research focused on exploring this question. They write, quote, "Interstellar space and the upper atmosphere of Earth are permeated by plasmas. Plasmas are believed to constitute a fourth state of matter and may represent a form of pre-life or inorganic non-biological life. As detailed in this report, pulsating glowing plasmas up to 1 kilometer in size and behaving similarly to simple multicellular organisms have been filmed over 200 miles above Earth within the thermosphere by 10 separate space shuttle missions. These glowing, pulsating plasmas grow in size, replicate, are attracted to, and intersect one another, often releasing kilometers in length plasma dust trails in their wake. Yet others engage in what appears to be hunter-predatory behaviors. They display all the characteristics of lifelike plasmas as defined by Alvain, Teodorani, Loznanu and Sanduloviciu and Tsairovich. These extraterrestrial plasmas filmed in the thermosphere may represent a non-biological form of pre-life before the acquisition of RNA and then DNA. Further, when they descend into the lower atmosphere, they would likely be classified as UFOs and UAP when observed." End of quote. This video compilation from multiple NASA shuttle camera feeds shows pulsating, glowing plasmas up to 1 kilometer wide behaving like simple multicellular organisms. These inorganic life forms are drawn to electromagnetic storms, gathering by the hundreds above hurricanes miles below. When they do, the hunt begins. Predators wiggle and shift, hitting other plasma prey along their path. A hierarchy may exist, with some predators striking several creatures, while some hunters only strike a few. This behavior appears in over a dozen scenes in the film. Many of these plasmas act like living organisms, showing complex interactions, turning, following, making sharp 45 or 90-degree turns, even reversing direction, demonstrating behaviors and intelligence of simple life forms. Common to these plasma entities is to be drawn to electromagnetic activity, whether thunderstorms or, as in the Space Shuttle mission STS-75 case, to a 12-mile tether generating intense electromagnetic fields. Like moths to a flame, hundreds, even thousands of these plasma organisms swarmed around, interacting with each other, and even moving along the tether. This display of purposeful, coordinated behavior provides compelling evidence of inorganic life forms in space, far beyond what could be expected from mere space debris or ice crystals.
Through the binoculars, and the best way I can describe it is there's some kind of reflective cloth or with some metallic-looking type of cloth of a structure structure that's definitely not rigid, or it's not a solid metal structure. It started over window 8, then quickly moved towards the nose of the orbiter, and we tracked it through windows 1, 2, 3, 4, and now it's out about window 5. It's moving away. Window flash. The light flashing off the V15 is there. That was me. What? I just thought of it in my imagination. Yeah, I saw it too, so it's not. There was 2 of them. There's another one. What are they? Let me show the lights flickering in here. Maybe they're taking pictures. What is this? There's this thing passing in front of us.
Okay, we're seeing 3 or 4 objects. Can you confirm that it's just the one that's actually moving? The other ones are just reflections?
No, there are 3 objects. The one you see 2 rings right there. They're the ones we kind of had the late tally-ho on. The one down the bottom, that was the one we initially saw.
Their behavior resembles that of various single-cell life forms on Earth. Yet these plasma entities are much larger, spanning meters to even kilometers. Our planet is surrounded by 2 extremely ancient cosmic dust clouds called Kordylewski Clouds, considered by some scientists to be complex dust plasmas. These clouds, like ghost satellites, reside at gravitationally stable points between the Earth and Moon. In this paper, the authors raise an intriguing question. Could the Kordylewski dust clouds be cosmic superbrains? In other words, could these clouds be a candidate for inorganic life in space? The researchers suggest that the answer is yes. In their paper, they argue that these dust clouds made of charged dust particles may exhibit the self-organization and complexity seen in other living systems that evolve from chaos to order. They write that the cloud appeared to be dynamic and contained within it smaller dust clouds, perhaps displaying a cellular-like structure. In other words, be an organic life form in space. Their dynamic structure forms and dissipates within the larger cosmic electrical networks, possibly acting as hosts for smaller entities. If so, these clouds could be transit hosts for different forms of electronic life, temporarily sheltering these entities as they drift through space, much like organisms that harbor parasites and predators in immature stages before they move on to their final hosts or destinations in deep space. Ken Shoulders predicted that electronic life forms could flourish in environments where conventional atomic structures fall short, leading to a new kind of supercommunicative existence. Shoulders also believed that pure electron entities can also be alien and have already begun long ago in regions of the universe unknown to us, and could evolve far faster than biological species. Even more interestingly, a needed substance for them had been available on Earth all along, and probably long before biological substance was available. Many legends and stories can be interpreted as references to such life forms. One example is a landed inorganic entity described by the shaman in Castaneda's book as an alien otherworldly flyer. These flyers, as he explained, are inorganic beings, scouts or explorers from the depths of the universe, possessing awareness far superior to that of humans. Shaman explains that they are akin to humans in certain ways. Sorcerers of ancient Mexico viewed them as predators, though, like dark shadows that move through the air and land flat on the ground. He added that they can sometimes be seen, especially by children, though they are often blocked from memory due to their terrifying appearance. But now we have the tools to reveal what was once invisible. Scientists from the main astronomical observatory in Ukraine published an independent study on UAP using 2 meteor stations. Their analysis revealed objects revealing flyers that appear as dark shadows, which they referred to as phantoms. These objects are estimated to be over 100 meters in size and detectable for only a fraction of a second. Astronomers observed both single and grouped flights of these oval-shaped shadows, ranging from 20 to 100 meters and moving at speeds of 2 to 30 kilometers per second. Quote, "Let us make an important remark about the features of the object. The colors of the object and the background are the same, but the object has less brightness compared to the sky background. The brightness of an object varies with distance. The object does not reflect or emit light. In a sense, it is invisible. It becomes visible due to the fact that it shields the scattered light of the sky behind it." End of quote.
So in Ken Childers' experiments and also in natural ball lightning, you can find that they change state, the black state and the white state. And an individual ball lightning can change back and forth between these states. And when the state is white, then they're very active and they can cause holes and tunnels and electrical shocks, and they can explode. But when the state is dark, in the black state, then they're very, very difficult to detect, and they can go through materials, glass or any other material, as if they, without any interaction with the material, or very, very little interaction. So here's the states. You can see the ring that the black ring is backlit by the bright light behind it, right? So that's why you can see a ring there. You can see sort of the outline of the object, but you can't actually see the object. The object is black, right? Because it's in the black state. But I believe that these black objects can change state to a white state, and then they can change back.
August 24th, 2018, Ukraine. Object 9252 was detected during sky monitoring in the Golosiev district of Kiev. The object moved at a speed of about 31.8 kilometers per second. The size is estimated to be about 94 meters. The object was shot in the falling sunlight, but it looked like a dark spot in the background of a bright sunny day sky. They also presented evidence of other phantoms, dark shadow-like objects similar to flyers. Some, as noted in the paper, were even visible to the naked eye. In their conclusion, they wrote, "All we can say about phantoms is coming from the part of space that lies outside Earth and its atmosphere, means belonging or relating to the universe." The Kordylewski Clouds paper turns to a striking possibility. These vast dust clouds in space might represent an advanced form of inorganic life. The authors propose that these clouds could even develop self-awareness and act as cosmic superbrains, indicating that biological intelligence may not be the pinnacle of evolution, but rather part of a larger continuum that extends into the very ancient tradition of inorganic life forms. They explain that it is possible because the mean distance between neighboring particles is very short, and yielding the possibility of interparticle communication if electromagnetic signals can be exchanged. These clouds could have other remarkable features. Authors proposed that dust particles in Kordylewski clouds, similar in size to bacteria, could be biological, given the abundance of organic compounds in space. They suggest that bacterial particles coated with semiconducting siliceous mantles could enhance interparticle electronic connectivity. Similar to how human cells function as collective intelligences composed of many parts, viruses and bacteria might act as agents contributing to the complexity of emerging intelligence as a hybrid inorganic entity in space. If the presence of a significant biological component in Kordylewski and other clouds is confirmed, it could suggest they play a role in spreading life across the universe. These particles might serve as carriers, seeding planets like Earth with the essential ingredients needed to form early ecosystems. Now, these clouds also would contain an intricate combination of charged dusty plasma in gaseous, liquid, and crystal states, with regions separated from each other by sheaths and double layers, and containing superconducting filaments. As discussed earlier, double layers in plasma not only act as membranes, they can store memory, and plasma crystals with their special memory marks have the same capability. However, information is not just stored. It also flows in between dusty plasma filaments that are arranged in spirals, much like the structure of human DNA. We might view the Kordylewski clouds as highly structured, intelligent systems capable of storing and processing information, with many surprising features yet to be discovered. This leads researchers to metaphorically refer to the Kordylewski dust clouds as gigantic plasma balls, similar to ball lightning, but on an immense cosmic scale. They write, "It is often said anecdotally that the human brain contains more neurons than there are observable stars in the night sky. But the human brain only fits inside a small skull. A stable, dusty, complex plasma ball of immense size, which has possibly endured for eons and experienced continual growth and expansion over countless millennia, is in principle capable of developing something resembling a much more complex nervous system than a human brain with its average lifetime of 100 years. A complex dust cloud which has existed for many millions of years might even have become self-aware, with all that this implies. It is conceivable that Fred Hoyle's fictional black cloud has a reality in the context of Kordylewski clouds, which of course he could not have recognized in 1957." End of quote. Considering all this, Kordylewski dust clouds might be viewed as potential candidates for space-based inorganic plasma life, while dusty plasmas from ball lightning events on Earth could represent terrestrial inorganic life. Both phenomena have the ability to self-organize and basically create themselves. Both are usually invisible to us. What if both organic and inorganic living systems are nested like patterns in Escher's drawings within a larger intelligent grid? What if skies are intelligent and the living cosmos drives the meaning of life, its logic, and its fundamental physics? Considering the vast complexity of the universe, there could be many more forms of intelligence much weirder than we can currently comprehend. And the high likelihood of inorganic life suggests that intelligent beings need not be embodied. Michael Levin, a synthetic biologist, believes that the search for alien intelligences isn't only looking to outer space. He is convinced that weird and wonderful forms of intelligence already exist right here on Earth. There are already aliens among us that stretch and often break our familiar ways of thinking about self and other. Levin notes that simpler parts, stable processes, and inorganic patterns we are made up of also have their own autonomy. He wonders if both patterns within us and in the world could function as independent actors with preferences and control. Could thoughts, for instance, which are basically patterns in the brain, actually become independent thinkers? His idea is that thoughts and thinkers might not be so different after all, and could be seen as existing on a wide continuum of intelligences. To illustrate his patterns idea, Levin proposes a thought experiment by imagining dense creatures from the Earth's core, seeing humans as fleeting patterns on the surface within a gas, a plasma, that they can't fully perceive. Despite observing signs of intelligence, skeptics among them dismiss us as short-lived mechanical phenomena, unlike their own enduring forms. Even if they could communicate with us, they'd still question our consciousness, seeing us as insignificant patterns in their system. When they present their findings at the Core Creature Conference, they face strong skepticism. Critics argue that these short-lived human patterns, barely lasting 100 years, are hardly a flicker to core creatures. They also point out that the cold surface temperatures make life impossible as they know it. To them, viewing these temporary patterns as intelligent life is like believing in ghosts, confusing material patterns with real beings that think and feel. How do we convince the core creatures we are real? First, we must ask ourselves, what evidence would convince us of their reality? What would it feel like to be a pattern of data flowing through a neural network, experiencing awareness from the inside? It may all depend on perspective. Likewise, we easily dismiss the idea of intelligence in patterns found in something as diffuse as solar plasma. To other intelligences, we might appear as temporary disturbances within a medium, like a soliton, a moving knot of stable energy, or even as a glider in a cellular automaton, or like a standing wave, similar to a whirlpool in water.
I'm getting real interested and excited because in quantum physics there's this notion of the underlying basis of the physical universe are these waves, even probability waves, non-physical, non-material waves, sort of
very, very astute
everything.
Because these waves are standing waves. Actually, the wave-particle so-called paradox isn't that bad when you consider that a particle is a wave packet. A packet of standing waves. Yeah. And that's why an electron can go through a plate and leave wave-like things. And actually our bodies are like fountains. The fountain has a shape only because it's being renewed every minute. And our bodies are being renewed. So we are standing waves. We're no exception.
And this deep structure of matter where we can say, you know, what we really are in our bodies is not what we appear to be.
Levin also writes that we tend to falsely identify the conscious being with the medium instead of the patterns that move and live in it. Thus, ourselves are an illusion from the perspective of the hardware, but eminently real if we accept the idea that they are a constantly self-constructing, changing bundle of stories about themselves and the outside world, a perspective-first view. This is a shift away from viewing consciousness as something tied strictly to a biological brain, and instead seeing it as a series of self-reinforcing patterns. Patterns that can spawn other patterns, much like how a mind dreams up ideas, or how a ripple spreads in water. Thoughts can grow and strengthen themselves, eventually forming their own viewpoint or sense of identity. As this happens, layers of information build up and create new and surprising traits. This idea resonates with concepts like thought forms or egregores in esoteric traditions, where repeated thoughts or emotions are believed to create distinct entities or forms that act semi-independently. Idea of alive patterns also echoes the notion of archetypes in Jungian psychology, where deep, universal patterns of thought manifest as distinct personalities or forces within the psyche. Jung saw archetypes as primal patterns that manifest through collective unconscious across human cultures. If we take Levin's suggestion of a continuum of agency, these archetypes could be seen as persistent cognitive patterns, deep recurring thought forms that shape behavior and perception across humanity, potentially acting as agents in their own right. Levin proposes to think about a continuum of agency, from fleeting thoughts to fully developed human minds and to something more. From that perspective, identification with our physical bodies is an illusion created by the patterns that move and live within those bodies. This idea suggests that what we experience as the self is not so much the hardware, the brain, body, but the emergent patterns that generate our self-narratives, experiences, and actions. In this scenario, some thoughts can keep repeating themselves and even alter their surroundings, like how living things shape their environments through niche construction. These thoughts can start acting like their own kind of intelligence, modify their own or even our minds to survive causing changes. And sometimes these changes might not always be helpful for us. Examples can include psychological phenomena like dissociative identity disorder, DID, where different patterns of thought become highly independent alters or separate identities. What if all these years we've been missing an important perspective? We've thought of the body as the thinker, with bioelectric patterns as its thoughts. But what if it's the reverse? Bioelectric patterns might be the real agents, using the body as a flash drive for long-term storage, adapting it over time as a guiding force makes adjustments, recording and reading information onto the physical form itself. Changes we see in gene expression, cell development, and other processes might actually be actions of the inorganic agent, like distributed complex biological plasma interacting with its memory medium via bioelectricity. From this perspective, the body shouldn't be the main target of interventions, but rather serve as an interface to the true agency. And what we really should start doing is talking to the inorganic bioelectric pattern, or pattern that psychology would call a psyche. This shift in perspective could explain many weird phenomena and have practical effects.
I think that the placebo effect is extremely profound. I think that what it's telling us is that there is a communication across levels. So meaning that you have a level of organization that consists of your body cells, and that has a degree of cognition and a degree of intelligence, but your body is also home to an additional intelligence, which lives probably largely in the brain. And it appears that those two can communicate in various ways. And I can imagine that there are lots of things to be discovered about ways to improve that communication. You know, we know there are certain practices where people extend the amount of time they can sit underwater and change their body temperature and change their pulse rate and things like that. I find it completely plausible that there are ways to communicate in that way to other cells in the body. Also, there is the field of hypnodermatology, where people by hypnosis try to treat various skin diseases, some of which have a neuroimmune component, some of which may not have a neuroimmune component. So the activity of the mind, which is simply the execution of the physiological computations that happen in the brain, affect physiological computations that happen outside the brain. I don't think that's particularly a stretch at all.
We may overlook intelligence in other types of matter or at different scales because we expect life and consciousness to look a certain way. Recognizing intelligence as a spectrum could reveal new forms of consciousness where thought and agency emerge in both organic and inorganic systems, even as self-organizing patterns and unexpected materials. These ideas resonate with ancient views in cultures like the Chukchi of Siberia and Koyukon Indians, where every being, human, animal, object, or spirit, is believed to have its own perspective or eyes observing the world. This idea is further reflected in Andean cultures with their Wak'as or ancient Egyptian kneaders, where natural elements like hills, springs, and stones were seen as aware and personified. It also gets us closer to the much bigger mysteries of life.
Somehow, whatever our consciousness is, whether you're a materialist like a neurosurgeon or you're a spiritualist, it doesn't matter. Your consciousness still sits somewhere in that space-time. Now, the open question is it independent of the body? Right? Does it, once created, is it now a pattern that can exist forever? It's a drawing of complexities of reality, and how these complexities of reality as organized by biological organisms can create a structure, our brain, that is sort of the birthplace of consciousness. But the math says, at least in his view of the world, the math says that once created, it doesn't need the structure anymore. Like a flower creates a seed, the seed doesn't require the flower anymore. The seed can go elsewhere. It's a postulate. It's an interesting idea, and it's backed by a lot of math that the physicists will argue about forever. But, to me, that's an interesting idea, that there is a physics support for the notion that consciousness can exist independent of what created the consciousness in the first place. To me, that's exciting. Now, whether that consciousness goes on to another place, and we can all read the books about the Monroe Institute, for instance, and this notion that there's people have out-of-body experiences and things.
These living patterns then can be an important fundamental principle in the universe. And things like archetypes, thought forms, and other psychological or parapsychological categories may be better understood as emergent, self-reinforcing patterns of agency. These patterns are not bound to traditional definitions of life or consciousness, like a thing, but exist as dynamic, evolving processes. That's how Vojevodsky, mathematician at Princeton, put it. At first, about a very general idea that was difficult for me to accept, but based on all the experience that I have been put through over the past 5 years, I could not think of anything else. There are non-human intelligences around us. By the word intelligence here, I mean an information system that has memory, motivations, the ability to model the external world and to plan it. They are not alien, but native to Earth, and most likely, evolutionarily older than humans. These minds actively and sometimes negatively affect people's lives. The non-human intelligences who seemed to be some kind of distant relatives of humankind. These ideas make us rethink life, intelligence, and the self. They suggest that thinking may exist far beyond just humans and bodies, possibly in non-living things, inorganic objects, or even short-lived patterns. Now, how do we define what's living and what's not then? What counts as an individual? Professor David Krakauer and his colleagues proposed that there are more fundamental individuals than the seemingly living or non-living forms of life around us. This individuality is defined by their ability to transmit adaptive information through time. They think these individuals don't have to be living organisms. They only need to pass on useful solutions to future generations. Individuals are dynamical processes that encode adaptive information, they say. In traditional views on the origin of life, replication, like how genes copy within cells, is key. But as seen with fireballs, replication can take many other forms. Copying a gene in a cell is just a chemical way to mimic the flow of information in living organisms. Even within biology, there are many types of individuals. Viruses that use host cells for replication, microbes that share genes across cells, and social insects like bees, where workers help a queen produce offspring. So how do we find this new type of individuals? Scientists propose to consider how different objects in our universe are detected at different wavelengths of light. Quote, "Many features of life, such as the heat signatures of metabolic activity, become visible only at higher wavelengths. Others, such as carbon flux, are visible at lower wavelengths. In the same way, individuals are detected by different informational frequencies." End of quote. They suggest that every life form has its own unique frequency or vibration, if you will, placing it on the continuum. When you observe a human from a distance, it appears to be a single coordinated entity. But when examined up close, this individual is actually made up of various independent agents, tissues, cells, and proteins, each with its own agenda. There are different levels of individuality. But there is a problem. If the physical origin and evolution of the universe is purely a mechanical computational process, as reflected in our bodily functions, then life would be reduced to basic processes like computation, replication, and metabolism. However, we are more than our hardware or bio-costumes. We, as collective intelligences, mirror the structure of the universe, where its higher intelligence, just like within us, might be distributed across smaller agents working together. Nobel laureate Hannes Alfvén echoed this idea, describing cosmic plasma as cellular and connected by plasma cables, cosmic arteries that transfer energy and information, defining distinct zones much like cells in living organisms. Ancient cultures also viewed the universe as a unified living organism. This perspective hints at a missing puzzle in the pure mechanical view of the universe: life. It is an active, living matter that brings adaptability and purpose. Life as we saw it can manifest not only in organic, but also in inorganic forms. This suggests that the universe itself might be alive. It can be a self-organizing computational system with its superintelligence emerging across all scales of space and time. Its smaller agents are distributed in all living beings, which, beyond their mechanical processes, are creators of meaning. Its consciousness is not an emergent property, but the fundamental medium of existence of life. From this point of view, organic species represent just a local node in a vast, recursive network of such cosmic superintelligence. There is also another, probably the most intriguing part. As Sondalovicius's work suggests, complex plasma processes may have led to exotic forms of life manifestation, not only on our planet, but in other worlds as well. This implies that our search for extraterrestrial life and unconventional intelligence on Earth requires a complete rethinking. The cell-like spheres we describe could be at the origin of other forms of life we have not yet considered, he states. There is life out there, but not as we know it.